about race, diversity, human connection. It's complicated, but it is 100% worth the effort.
And that is what we're all about. Welcome to the Let's Talk Sis podcast.
Someday we'll make it on
Conversations are hard.
Days we only can try.
Lean into new perspectives, new experiences, new stories.
Each way we're gonna get better.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Sis podcast. We are here in season 2 with a really exciting episode. We are sitting down and having a conversation with America's government teacher, Sharon McMahon. We are giddy. We are so excited.
Yes.
We're going to dive deep. We're going to get a little bit of like government 101 and ask some more personal questions and just get to know her better. So come along and listen. Okay, so first of all, I do want to just talk a little bit about what we were talking about. That during times of distress, especially right now where things are so polarizing and it's just overwhelmed for our nervous systems, every time we open our phone, we're just bombarded with something that it seems to, and you were sharing that historically this is something that we've seen, that sometimes we start seeking things like, I don't know, celebrity gossip or fun things that just seem so lighthearted and just, I don't know, can distract us for a minute. Can you explain that of why we do it and how social media has impacted that need right now?
Yeah, I mean, throughout history, when you've had times of like incredible turmoil and upheaval, this is when people go to the movies more. Like, for example, during World War II, in some ways, the movie industry really boomed because people were they needed a moment to not be worried about their loved one overseas. They needed a moment to not be rationing pantyhose, they literally just needed a momentary break from their real lives. And that honestly is a deep part of the human psyche. Before we had movies, there were other things that people would do. They would, gather, they would sing, they would gossip about the community, they would engage in, especially if you were a woman, you would engage in some kind of handcrafts with your friends and neighbors, you'd watch each other's kids. Like, there's no shortage of ways in which humans will invent an opportunity for themselves to sort of check out of reality. And that's really because our ability to maintain a sustained amount of attention on a difficult topic, our brains are not hardwired to just exist in a fight or flight mode indefinitely.
Yes.
We truly, it's not only can we not sustain it, if we try to sustain it, it is often very damaging to our mental health.
Through the roof. Yes.
Damaging to our mental and our physical health. So, I mean, it's really no surprise to me that people like me, and I'm sure lots of people watching this, are finding a little extra delight in Bravo these days, right? Yes. Like finding a little extra delight in, like, he said what? Like there's definitely the desire to sort of observe somebody else's petty problems from afar.
Yes.
And to not be like, oh, she didn't go to her opening, like, oh, she opened that restaurant and so didn't go. That feels like such an escape for us in this moment. And I will tell you one thing, though, that research has shown that people who are highly intelligent and also high achieving people often enjoy watching reality TV, mindless TV more than people.
That is fascinating.
Wow.
Because their brains are so active and they're so highly engaged in the world and they have so much ability to get things done that it feels like they need that escape even more than, say, an average person. So I can't give you the exact percentages of, like, if you're a high-achieving woman, you're 25% more likely to watch Bravo. I don't know those exact percentages.
But I mean, are you saying we're high-achieving?
I'm just saying.
We're liking this.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Like, I don't think of it as a. I just view it as like, this is part of my maintenance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I need to maintain my own self, and this is one of the ways, not all of the ways, but one of the ways that I do it is by giving my mind a break.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I would love to know, because I think of you as being someone who is always in the hard and heavy. Like you are teaching us every day. I'm like, what is Sharon going to say about this? And we actually recently had a social media meeting and we got to talk about our dream content. And literally 3 of us on the meeting said Sharon's content because we're constantly learning. But when I take a step back and I think of what it requires of you every day to be giving us this, I'm curious, besides Bravo, what is your maintenance? Like, what is it that, how are you keeping your nervous system and yourself grounded?
Well, I mean, I live in the woods on a dirt road. I literally live in a little house in the big woods on a dirt road.
I love that.
You can't see my house from the street. I can't see any of my neighbors. And I have lots of flower gardens and I have dogs. And so I do live in a physical environment that I find very peaceful. And I know that not everybody wants to or can live on acreage in the woods. But, I only moved there a handful of years ago. Actually, I didn't, before that I lived in big cities and, suburban neighborhoods. So honestly, sleeping with my window open and listening to the bird song and the spring peepers. Do you guys have spring peepers in Utah?
I do not think we
I
do.
don't think
They're
so.
little teeny tree frogs.
Oh.
And so if you ever listen to like a noise machine and it's like nighttime sounds and you hear like it almost sounds like a cricket chirping.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
They emerge in the springtime and there's thousands of them and they make so much noise when the sun goes down. So, I mean, I know this is true, not just for me, but humans do need time to be connected to nature.
Yes.
Yeah.
They absolutely do. In whatever format that is for wherever somebody lives, I don't view it as optional. I'm not saying everybody needs to move to the country, but everybody does need to spend some time outside. Like that, I believe that environment, it's designed for us to help us sort of recenter ourselves, ground ourselves back in reality, be surrounded by what is real and not what our mind is concocting for us in this moment. I think it helps us stop from sort of spinning out of control because, again, our minds will take the ball and run with it.
Yeah.
A lot of times in a very unhealthy way. And so that's also part of it, is just being in a physical environment that is grounding.
Oh, I love that. And this is what is interesting. I have found myself recently because I work in kind of this, I don't even know how to describe what we do at this point.
Social, cultural, political space.
Yes. And even with we have full-time jobs, we do a lot of side things. And there are moments that I feel like I'm so deep in the work that I'm doing where we're trying so hard to communicate with people from different backgrounds, different beliefs, different political views. And I think also living in Utah, there's times where I just can really only see that reality.
Yeah.
And then when I step out of it, step into nature, even travel, I'm always so thankful for those moments where I was like, wait, Americans, wait, we're doing good things. We love each other. It's not exactly how it feels on social media.
I know.
And I feel like that is so important. And recently I attended a pro-democracy conference, and it was so interesting to be in a room where it wasn't like, you're the good guys, you're the bad guys, or vice versa. But it's like, how do we work together and how do we find this, really center on this common ground of democracy, the Constitution, things that everyone in that room could value. And I don't always feel that.
No.
And how can we create spaces in our everyday life where we can feel that we are on the same team?
That is such it's such an important thing to think about because, your real life is not funneled through an algorithm.
Yeah.
And if you're just at a little cafe eating a croissant, and you're surrounded by people that you don't know who they voted for. You don't know, but yet you could have a perfectly nice interaction with them, pet their dog, and be like, "It's good morning, it's great to see you." That is an opportunity for us to sort of, again, recenter ourselves in our own communities. But the idea that our lives are being lived online is, I feel like so many people are really struggling with that right now, that our whole life is being lived online. I definitely struggle with it. I'm not coming from a position of high horse when I'm talking about this topic. Because my job is online, much of my life is online.
Yeah, it is.
And so I do have, this sort of perhaps a bit of a different perspective on that topic. But I don't think that our brains and our nervous systems and our communities are hardwired to be filtered through the lens of a billionaire designed algorithm that is intended to keep us angry and addicted so that we continue to engage with the content on the platform that they own. I don't know that that is in our best interest.
Right.
I think it's in somebody's best interest, but I don't know that it's ours. Right? And I
agree.
Look, when we stop to understand that, I feel like it reframes everything that we're seeing online. Like I'm actually being fed this content because somebody wants me to feel angry, and and as soon as I start feeling angry, I start getting these little hits of neurotransmitters that make me want to go back and see what else happened. Listen,
You're curious,
I'm curious. I've read some comment sections. Like I've seen some things, and sometimes if the comment sections are really going wrong for somebody that you also dislike. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, it's very addictive to come back and watch them get roasted. It really is.
Yes.
That's just how the human brain is wired. And it requires a relatively high amount of self-control to not engage in that kind of behavior. I'm not perfect in any way. I'm, again, not preaching to people beneath me. I totally get it. But I don't know that it's particularly good for us to live our lives in that fashion.
Yeah.
That's not how humans have developed society over time.
It's not, and it's something, this is a conversation, we have kids, and I think we're trying to help our kids figure this out. And even my kids, well, my oldest, she does have social now, a teen account, but my other kids don't, and I'm still shocked with how much they see when they don't have it, just through friends or people sharing it in messages, just so many different things that I try to explain to them. I'm like, hey, like back when grandma was a little girl, people thought smoking was hot and sexy and they didn't think it was bad for you. And then over time we learned, and there were all of these guidelines and recommendations, and all these experts got together and helped us realize it was not hot, sexy, or healthy like maybe we thought. And I said, I believe the same thing will happen with social media, with the amount of time we spend there, how it affects our mental health, our physical health. And I feel it. And it's hard too when it is your job. It's part of your job to know what's going on, to socially listen, to understand there's so much goodness that can come from it.
Yeah.
And I think that we can all speak to that.
That's kind of the question I wanted to ask you, because, there's this very unhealthy layer to social media. We doom scroll, the dopamine hits, all of that. And then at the same time, it is a massive education platform. It is something that connects us across the world. And so I'm curious, what inspired you to step up and to speak out initially on your platform and to start being America's government teacher, essentially?
Well, I mean, the bottom line, the short story is it was the pandemic. I was running a different business and had an opportunity to be I was in the same position that so many of us were in, which is that everybody is at home.
Yeah.
And we've already watched Tiger King. Yes. And we've already. Do you remember Tiger King?
I sure remember Tiger King. And people were making sourdough and all kinds of things.
Just we were all home, and we'd all come to the end of Netflix, and we only want to watch so much television. Yeah. And then I also had another layer on top of that, which was during the pandemic, my husband was very sick with stage 5 renal failure. Oh, no. And then he ended up getting a kidney transplant in August of 2020, which is really the height of the pandemic. This was before they developed vaccines or treatments for COVID. And COVID, the first initial strains of COVID were extremely hard on your kidneys. Yeah. And so he already doesn't have functioning kidneys. So we were especially isolated because we could not afford for him to get sick. His chances of dying were roughly 30% if he got COVID, which was nobody would put their spouse in a car and be like, you have a 1 in 3 chance of dying on the way home.
Yeah, no,
you would never
you
be
wouldn't.
like, that's an okay risk.
Yeah.
So even our kids who, by most measures, most kids did just fine. What we couldn't afford to have happen was for our kids to go get sick, even to be asymptomatic and to pass it on to my husband. So that was a very, very tremendously, isolating and challenging time, not just for me, but for everybody. So, I had more time at home than I had ever had by no choice of my own. And that's true of most of us. We were all sort of put into this position. And because I've always been busy and I've always been somebody who's accomplished things and, achieved things, I had never, ever had the opportunity to just be home and not be working. I've had a job since I was 14 years old.
Yeah.
Right. Truly. So most of the time I've had 2 jobs, at least.
Yeah.
You guys can relate to this.
Yes.
Like you have 2 jobs,
Yeah.
or 3 jobs if you count the children, and
Exactly. Yes.
So I've never ever had that opportunity before, and we were coming into a very contentious election cycle. It doesn't matter who you voted for. We all agree that was crazy. Let's not do the 2020 election again. Nobody was like, that was fun. Repeat. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It was very contentious. So I started seeing some things on the internet that were just incorrect. Maybe you're familiar with some incorrect things on the internet. And, one of the things that I remember seeing was somebody who had, a man who had commented on one of my friend's Facebook posts.
Okay.
And he was in her comments being very confidently wrong. Very confidently wrong about something that was not an opinion. It was about whether or not the Electoral College was a university you could graduate from. Okay, that's not an opinion.
Yeah.
Right.
It is just not a university
wrong.
that you
Yes.
can
Yeah.
graduate from. Okay, there's not even like an Electoral College building. Okay, there's not even like an office.
Doesn't exist.
That doesn't exist. It's a process that is gone through in all of the states, and each state has their own location. It's usually the state capital. There's no board of governors of the Electoral College. That doesn't exist. That's not a thing.
Right.
So he was trying to say, when people go to the Electoral College building on, the day that the election is certified, and he was maintaining that this Electoral College building was right by the White House. And I was like,
I'm so fascinated.
Yeah.
but all of this is wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
None of this is right. I decided sort of in that moment that I could either reply back and be like, actually, and type a whole paragraph and, get into all my examples and facts and figures. Or I could make a little video about how the Electoral College actually worked. And maybe somebody could leave the link to that video in the comments, and that video would sort of outlive the comment section of this one Facebook post.
Brilliant.
So I did that, and I intentionally used little props, like little teeny stuffed animals that are like this big, and I gave the candidates fake names. It was like Susan and Jim or, whatever. So it was not, it was very, I tried hard to depoliticize it.
Yeah.
And because at the end of this sketch, somebody needed to win so that I could show how it worked, right?
Yes.
Like how you accumulate enough Electoral College votes. And I didn't want anybody to object to the content because I used the wrong illustration of and then such and such won. And they would immediately discount whatever I had to say.
Politicized.
Exactly.
Yep.
Oh, you're just biased against whatever. So that was really the genesis of how I got started posting educational content on the internet. I was home with a sick husband. He had had a kidney transplant 6 weeks prior. He's still very sick after the transplant because you're on 12 drugs, and it's just it's a very challenging process. So then I just, every week I asked the people who followed me on social media, small number of people, what do you want me to talk about next week? And I started making one little video every week, and soon I started getting phone calls from radio and TV stations, local ones, to just do a little brief segment about, what to expect in the upcoming election.
Yeah.
Without without giving people, my opinion about who should win, just describing the process. And then, I hate to say the rest, as they say, is history, but that's really how I got started doing this. Is at a time during the pandemic, people were posting wrong things on the internet, and I just started answering people's questions.
And clearly it was a need for more than people posting wrong things, because half of us slept through our 11th grade U.S. government class.
Yes.
And so then we turn 18 and we're like, we can vote, and that's about all we understand at that point. So this was so needed.
And it's still so needed. And I feel like even having conversations with my kids, even between sisters, Shantae and I'm like, wait, did we miss that? Like, how did we? And you have to go back and learn it. And I do think tying back to social media is it's making so many important things accessible to people that typically would not be able to go get a little refresher on a civics class, on a government, like just these things that you break down and make so simple. And I love how it started with an object lesson. I truly do, because we've also learned that Americans want simple, straightforward information. The more complicated it gets, I think, like we were describing before, we're overwhelmed. There's so many things that we're worried about, responsibilities that we have, stressors, that if you can give it to us in these little bits and pieces, it's so helpful. So I love that you break it down and you're continuing to break it down.
Okay, let's have a school moment here, like, because we have our best teacher here.
Yes.
And I think there are a lot of words that we all say, just like we think we have this connected or unified understanding of certain words, and then we realize sometimes we're talking about different things. So I would love to talk about the word democracy for a second, because, I mean, Alexis said pro-democracy a little bit earlier, and I have tended to think, oh yeah, we're a democracy, everyone's for that, and then we have to pause and say, do we all have the same definition of this? So could you give us maybe a simple, everyday person definition of democracy?
I mean, democracy comes from a Greek word that means rule by the people. That's what it means. That is the Greek root word of democracy. Sometimes people conflate the definition of representative democracy and direct democracy or a constitutional republic, and they conflate these terms. But at its foundational understanding, a democracy is a government of the people. The power comes from the people and not from birthright, which is what we see in monarchy. It doesn't come from military conquest, as we see in some other countries in the world. Power is bestowed upon leaders, whether they are elected representatives or they are presidents. Power is bestowed upon leaders from the people. So I always just go right back to the origin of the word itself and the origin of the concept of democracy, which is in ancient Greece. The power and rule of the people. Now, in the United States, we have decided to structure our democratic form of government in the form of a constitutional republic. You have probably heard people say, it's not a democracy, it's a republic.
Yes.
Like, have you heard
Yes,
that?
absolutely.
It's like saying, it's not a dog, it's a golden retriever. Like that's what they're saying when they say that. Like a constitutional republic is a form of democracy. You can't have a constitutional republic that is not a democracy. There are ways to have democracies that aren't constitutional republics. Other countries have different structures of government. But at its core, it's the power from the people. So this constitutional republic that we have structured has representative democracy, in which we elect leaders who represent our interests in the legislative branch. And then, of course, we also elect a president through a rather convoluted process via the Electoral College, who runs the executive branch. And, we can go into how the executive branch works, if you really want to, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
It is power that comes from the people. And there are some core principles of democracy that I keep coming back to that I really want to tuck in people's hearts and have them know these things. These are very foundational to the American system of democracy. And these are things like the rule of law. that we are a nation of laws and not a nation of men, which is, how the framers conceived of this, that we're not just going based on what one person says, we're following what the law says.
Yes.
And we make the laws, by electing representatives that help make the laws on our behalf, right? So we're following what the law says and not just the whims of an individual.
Yeah.
So the rule of law is part of it. Of course, separation of powers into different levels of government. We've decided in the United States that we're going to have national, state, and local levels of government. A lot of other democracies don't have that. They have a far more centralized system than we do. They don't have these shared power structures that are, that really vary state to state. Most European countries have a much more centralized central government, and then they have these little councils that will help carry out what has been passed at the national level. They don't have an additional layer of state government the way that we do here, but that doesn't make them not a democracy. Right? They just structured their democracy a little different than ours. And then we also have a system of checks and balances in which each of the three co-equal branches are meant to limit the power of the others. Those are things that are true of American democracy, and many other democracies have similar principles. But those are things I really want people to be able to remember.
Yeah.
Just these very basic principles of democracy that transcend any partisanship. That these are things that people have agreed on in this country for hundreds of years, coming up on the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. These are not new ideas that I came up with, right?
Right,
These
right.
are foundational to the who we are as an American, an imperfect, but always striving to be more perfect form of American government.
So what does being a democracy, what does that require of us as the people? That seems like a pretty big responsibility that it places on us.
Democracy is, as some of our founding fathers have said, the worst form of government, and yet no one has ever invented anything better.
Yeah.
Right? It's the worst form of government, but it's the best one we have, in that it requires effort from the citizens.
Yeah.
If we want to set it and forget it, then we can just go ahead and have an authoritarian regime. Right? Like we can just go ahead and get a king if we want to set it and forget it.
Right.
If we want to have power that comes from the people, we have to be willing to be the people that the power comes from. So, of course, everybody knows that, in a democracy, you vote. Like everyone understands that. Unfortunately, too few people participate in that.
Right.
Yes.
For a variety of reasons. But there are actually many ways to be involved in the democratic process, more than just voting for things. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed by all of the, many, many things that have to happen to make all of these levels of government work. And, one of the things that I want to encourage people to sort of internalize is that nobody is supposed to be doing everything. Stop, absolve yourself of that responsibility that it's your job to do everything.
That overwhelm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not your job to do everything. And in fact, anybody who claims that it's their job to do everything, they want to be an authoritarian leader, right? Like that's the opposite of what we're talking about. You have an important skill set. You were given talents. You were given life experiences. I believe that everybody was given things that they feel especially drawn to or especially passionate about, or they find themselves especially talented in. I believe those things were given to you for a reason, and that you are supposed to use those skills and talents, not just for yourself, but for the betterment of your community. So when we're talking about a democratic form of government, or how do you participate in democracy, that can be as simple as doing things to improve your own community. Because if the government is the people, then the people are what we need to take care of. Right? And it doesn't mean ignore all the things that are happening in Congress and pretend that's not happening. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying bury your head in the sand. But if the government is of the people, we have to take care of the people. We have to take care of our community.
Amen.
We do.
I love that so much.
Well, and it's interesting because as you're sharing this, I'm thinking of myself very personally. And I'm thinking of oftentimes when it comes to voting, I take the responsibility in a way that is so important. It's so deep. I understand the women that fought for the right to vote.
Yes.
Even Black people in America
Yes.
not having that right to vote.
100%.
And so there have been times, especially I remember when I had young babies, where I thought, this is like showing up unprepared for the most important test of my life. And I remember there was one election where I was just so overwhelmed. I didn't know. I had family that had strong views on one side, other family members strong views on the other side, and I just felt so emotional. You know, I was probably like pregnant or postpartum, but everything just felt so big and so important. And I remember my husband saying to me, like, well, maybe you just shouldn't vote then if this is creating so much. And I felt just like, no, but I have to. But this is so important. But I feel like right now it's hard to find places or community where you can even prepare together without it feeling like maybe you're up against it's us versus them or right and wrong, and I have family that views things this way or family that views these things this way, and it feels so much harder to prepare now. And we have more information at our fingertips than ever before.
And like you mentioned, sometimes it's not correct information.
Yes,
you know?
so there's that also. And then I think the awareness of being like, okay, well, now I have to fact check and cite these sources, and now I need to look at this media bias chart, and then I need to check myself. And I feel like there are some of us that are so aware of the importance of it, and we have to do the best that we can with what we have in the stage of life that we're in.
Yeah.
And I feel like the local, getting to know the people that are running, it is through community, through showing up, getting involved in your kid's school, city meetings, gatherings. That's a big important way how we get to know people. And I just think our neighbors, and getting curious and trying to understand all of these different perspectives, and then trying to figure out what we believe and how to use that privilege that we have of voting in the best way. It does feel like so much. And I think that is one of the biggest things that we're fighting right now, is that overwhelm, and knowing that, yes, we still have to whittle it down and take the best next step. And I love how you share examples in your book and in everything I've ever heard you say about these everyday Americans that take that best next step. And it is not that they know everything or they're experts at everything. And so can you give us, I don't know, maybe a story or example of someone that took their best next step and didn't become paralyzed with overwhelm?
I love that question because the overwhelm is so real.
Yeah.
It truly is. It's so real. And I do think some people have personalities that their natural sort of inborn temperament makes them more easily able to compartmentalize things.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And those are the people you want to be, like the first responders. Like, I don't need a first responder coming to my car accident who was like, oh no, and they just collapse on the ground.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? There's nothing I can do.
Right.
Like,
that would be me. I should not be a first responder.
Right. I need somebody who is able to like look at this. I need the ER doctor to not be like, this is disgusting. Do you know what I mean? Somebody who can compartmentalize that and look at the situation objectively. And we also need people whose hearts are so full of compassion that they are easily overwhelmed by the injustices of the world. Like, we need both of those kinds of people and all the people in between, right? So if somebody's feeling overwhelmed, it doesn't mean they're necessarily doing it wrong. They just need to learn to work with their own inborn temperament and their own gifts and their, like, there is this place for you, even if you feel easily overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So don't let that stop you. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, nearly everyone you admire from history. If you stop and think for a moment about, like, who's a person that I think is just really great. Could be somebody, like Abraham Lincoln. It could be somebody, Harriet Tubman. It could be, any number of people, famous or not famous. Could be your great-grandma. They have never felt the need to try to fix everything. that has never been
true.
part of their story. And we never look back at Harriet Tubman, for example, and be like, but she didn't reform banking. She didn't.
That is so true.
Yeah. She did not fix the railroad system. So, not about it. We don't think that about people that we admire from history. Everybody in history has had an impact in the way that they, where they were, with the resources available to them, with the gifts that they were given. And we look back on them fondly for having done what they could in that realm. I'm very fond of Harriet Tubman. She's a character of mine, or a hero of mine from history that I love to study. And I wish more was known about her. And I wish she'd be on my list of people I want to have dinner with.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And this is a woman who suffered a traumatic brain injury as a child. Yes. She's a disabled American. For the rest of her life, she was disabled. And, had what we know today as epilepsy, but they didn't have language for that at the time. She escapes enslavement. And we all know her for helping other people to escape enslavement. That's what she's most famous for, of course. But one of the things that I really admire about her is her ability to do what she could with the resources available to her. Yeah. She knew how to walk through, cold, dark woods at night. She had learned how to navigate that land from her father, who worked on the rivers. She had picked up these skills of reading the stars and understanding where the wind was blowing. By the way, nobody actually knows how she did it. Right? It's kind of incredible. I've asked many historians who study Harriet Tubman professionally, how did she do it? How is she walking at night with no map in the winter with a bunch of scared people and babies? And how did she do it? Nobody knows. She doesn't know how she did it. Except Harriet Tubman believed that she was partnering with God. That is how she viewed her role. God needed her to do something, and she needed God to do things. Yeah. She really viewed it as a reciprocal arrangement here. So when I think about her, I certainly don't look at her and think, I don't look at her shortcomings. And we tend to experience our own lives through a series of shortcomings. We tend to look at the ways in which we are failing. We tend to look at the negative feelings that we're having. Human brains have a negativity bias. We remember negative things way more easily. We tend to berate ourselves and compare ourselves to all of the ways that we could be succeeding and are not. Yeah. And one of the things I just really admire about her is her ability to just be unapologetically herself and to allow herself to be used. Her belief was that she was being used by God to do things for not just the people that she was serving, but she believed that what she was doing would have an important impact. Perhaps in ways that she would never see. And if you look now, I've done some pretty simple calculations. She was able to help rescue roughly 70 people from enslavement, right? Which is an incredible number.
Yeah.
But if you think about the number of people alive today in the United States who are the descendants of those 70 people, it is tens of thousands of Americans today who maybe don't even realize that they were impacted by the work of Harriet Tubman. She had no way to know who she was going to be impacting in the future. She had no way to know who these people would become after she helps guide them to freedom. Some of them I'm sure she kept in touch with, but this was a woman without access to literacy. She could only write letters that she would dictate to people and receive letters that people would read to her. So she had to have faith that what she was doing would matter. And I think we have lost touch with that faith, that what we are doing will matter. It will matter in ways we will never know, and we have lost the ability to trust that that means something. And our forebears, the people who have come before us, and in whatever capacity you like to think about that, either you're related to them, by blood, or they're just people who are Americans whose work you admire, they have always had faith that what they would do would matter to their descendants, whether, again, related by blood or not. If you look at even the language of the preamble to the Constitution, it refers to securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, to the people who come after us. So, I find it helpful in difficult moments, of which there are many. I find it helpful to think about, not about what can I get for myself, what can I do for myself in this moment, how can I, make things better today, and I try in an imperfect way to reframe thinking about it as not losing faith that what I do will matter.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. That was part 1 of our conversation with Sharon, and please join us next time for part 2.
Someday we'll make it on by.
Let's Talk Sis is produced by Ross Booth. For more, join us on Instagram at letstalk_sis.
Either way, we're gonna get better.